Well, now, figures obtained by More4 News reveal that private prisons in England and Wales are underperforming compared to public jails. The government has promoted private prisons as a means of increasing competition and raising standards within the sector. But the new figures suggest this simply isn't happening. Here's Joanna Simpson.
Prisons in England and Wales face a spiralling population. With sentences getting tougher, 83,000 are now crammed into prisons originally built to house 75,000. By 2015, it's thought the figure could rise to almost 100,000. The government's response has been to look to the private sector to build and run new prisons, a policy supported by the Conservatives. But figures obtained by More4 News suggest this may not be the solution.
These are the Ministry of Justice's own figures assessing how well their jails are run. We obtained them under the Freedom of Information Act. They measure prison performance on a scale of 1 to 4 and cast doubt over the government's claim that private prisons are driving up standards.
The figures show that in September last year, the country's private prisons, which house 11% of the prison population, scored an average mark of 2.7 out of 4, compared to 2.83 in the public sector. By December, this gap had widened to 2.6 in the private sector and 2.85 in the public sector. That's a difference of almost 10%. Separate figures detailing complaints by inmates against prison officers are even more striking. The figures investigated by the Prisons and Probation Ombudsman show that in the private sector, an average of 5.8 complaints were upheld at each prison last year. In the public sector, the figure was just 3.11. That's 85% more complaints in privately run prisons. For Bobby Cummins, a former prisoner himself, who now campaigns on behalf of prison inmates, the figures come as no surprise.
When you look at the prisons for profit, and that's how I view private prisons, you're getting staff that are paid very low wages, so you're getting poor calibre of staff dealing with the most vulnerable people in our society, and it's profit for pain, and it's not morally right in my eyes.
Other prison campaigners also feel there's little to indicate private prisons have improved standards overall.
We think standards are pretty mixed, that there are some good private prisons, but there are also some very poorly performing ones. So the evidence doesn't suggest that it's driven up standards. There's a high degree of resentment and rivalry between the two sectors, and up until recently, very little sharing of good practice and information, which is really disappointing.
But the private firms running the new prisons defend their record.
Some are better, some are not as good in both sectors. You know, prisons are living communities. They evolve, they change, and so forth. And so, am I satisfied by what we are delivering? We always want to deliver as much as we can. I believe we're doing a very good job for the taxpayer and the prisoner.
But G4S's prison at Rye Hill in Warwickshire emerges as one of those with the most problems. In 2005, a prisoner was murdered there during an inspection. And in 2007, the Chief Inspector of Prisons said it was unclear if it was staff or prisoners who controlled parts of the jail. The new figures suggest Rye Hill continues to struggle. It was given an overall mark of just 2 out of 4, and in the categories of security, respect and purposeful activity, gained a score of just 1. There were 22 complaints upheld against staff last year, well above average, but G4S says this reflects a culture of openness.
There is a strong argument that says in a culture that encourages people to complain using legitimate processes, I would expect a reasonable level of complaints. Equally, I expect, and Rye Hill certainly delivers, a standard of reasonableness that if we believe a prisoner has a legitimate complaint, we will uphold it.
G4S claims there have been considerable improvements since the figures were produced. But campaigners are concerned that having gone down the path of privatisation, the government will now find it difficult to turn back.
Campaigners point out that privatisation creates a powerful lobby with a vested interest in a large prison population.
One of the issues it has introduced is a kind of market drive to increase the prison population, to grow that business, and that's something that really does concern us.
Prison should never be about business. Prison should be about protecting society, containment. It should be about rehabilitation. It should never be a business. And if you've got a business, there's only one thing you do is expand your business.
The fear of many campaigners in the prison sector is that the government and opposition are now committed to a dramatic expansion of private prisons when the case for them is far from proven.
Joe Simpson there. I know we did, of course, ask to speak to the Ministry of Justice about this, but we were told no one was available. They did, however, give us the following statement. The introduction of privately managed prisons has helped to generate significant overall improvements in value for money and performance, including in the public sector, which has been energised by the more competitive environment. The National Offender Management Service has robust systems in place for managing performance in prisons, whether in the public or private sector.